My name is Adrienne Gonzalez, and today I'll be summarizing chapters 3, 4, and 5 of Reinventing Project-Based Learning, your field guide to real-world projects in the digital age. Chapter 3 is titled Imagining the Possibilities. The main focus of this chapter is establishing and identifying the conceptual framework of a project. The benefits found within this is that project-based learning promotes students to problem solve, work and collaborate with others, and use complex thinking about real-world circumstances in the classroom. An example that I read within the chapter was unlike traditional learning in which ideas are sorted into pure disciplines, project learning, like real life, gets messy and overlaps multiple disciplines. Another thing discussed in Chapter 3 is Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives, which is remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. 3 higher order thinking skills that are connected with project-based learning and student outcomes is analyze, which is examining, explaining, investigating, characterizing, classifying, comparing, deducing, differentiating, discriminating, illustrating, and prioritizing. Evaluating, which would be judging, selecting, deciding, justifying, and so on. And creating would be adapting, anticipating, combining, composing, inventing, and so on. Another really important thing mentioned in Chapter 3 is about how today's digital age society allows educators to present digital technological project-based learning activities for their students through websites such as Google Forums, Glogster, Skype, Padlet, Today's Meet, Wikispaces, Classrooms, etc. Google Maps, all of these things are perfect for children to use in the classroom and also be able to work out these projects outside of the classroom. For Chapter 4, it is called Strategies for Discovery. The main focus of this chapter was selecting and designing your project. So as an educator, while deciding on a project for students, educators can create their own projects based on interests of the students or themselves. They can collaborate with other educators and see what they have done, or they can stick with the previously designed project. These project ideas usually derive from potential for more meaningful expressive learning. So usually from books, our textbook gave an example, To Kill a Mockingbird. Project plans developed by and for other teachers, news stories, so current events, things that are going on either in your close community or worldwide or nationally, student opinions and interests, and a classroom irritant put to educational use. So maybe something that your class is having an issue with, you could create a project around that to help them problem solve and come up with ideas on their own of how they could fix their problem. Overcoming potential pitfalls in the creating of these projects. So long on activities, short on learning outcomes, technology layered over traditional practice. So you really want to make sure that you're incorporating this technology and not just sticking it in and making it intentional. Overly scripted with many steps. That's really hard for students to follow along when there are so many trivial steps within the project. Not enough focus on formative assessment. So if you don't set clear guidelines for students, they're going to have a hard time knowing exactly what it is to do. And then when it comes time for them to be graded, they can be confused as to why they didn't do as well as they thought, just because you were not clear enough with your guidelines or your rubric. An assessment that doesn't feel authentic. That's something that could be a very big pitfall. And when you're creating a project with a classroom of students, it should be not just authentic to you, but authentic to your students and something that they care about. And you should really be intentional when you're explaining what they did, how they could improve, and things like that. So some tips to improve a project and its quality would be to compare and contrast, predict things. You get a great idea of your students. So predicting how certain students or overall will work with the project is important. Understanding causal relationships, so cause and effect, determining how parts relate to the whole system. Look at changes over time. So say you've done a project with a class at the beginning of the year, and then you go next year, you do it again. Every year you look at the changes, and then you can modify that project and make it better for each class. Identifying patterns and trends, kind of the same thing. Examining perspectives and alternate point of view. So this is another thing where you can collaborate with your colleagues and see how they feel about it and get some input. Extrapolate to create something new. So always keep new ideas. Just interesting things. Always keep up on what your students really want. I feel like that's the best way to plan a project. Some important features of a high quality project would be that it's designed with the possibility of different learning paths. They're generative, causing students to construct meaning from it. They center on a driving question or are otherwise structured for inquiry. So either there's a main question behind it or it's structured to have whoever is taking in the project to look for more questions or to ask you more questions about it. Capturing student interest through complex and compelling real life or simulated experiences. So once again, touching on real life will really help your students stay engaged. They're realistic, therefore they cross multiple pipelines, multiple different avenues. They reach beyond school to involve others. So it's not just going to be about school. You want to know about your students. You don't know about their home life in particular, but just things that they're interested in, different worldly issues or national issues or even community issues that they're interested in. This is a great way to drive the project. So for chapter 5, it was called Making Assessment Meaningful. The main focus of this was project-based learning educators' main purposes for assessment. So the first main purpose would be measuring student and learning outcomes in a summative way. And the second would be that evaluating the quality of the project so it can be even better the next time. There was a figure in our book right here that shows evidence, activities, objectives, and just how you can get the project conversation going and how you can continue when they have questions throughout the project. And a project assessment, so building rubrics. Constructing a project rubric causes a teacher to carefully think through learning targets and standards of achievement. Useful to share expectations with parents, students, and colleagues. An assessment tool should look like it has categories, so skills, knowledge, and processes, and each category must have 3 to 5 criteria that are evaluated against 3 to 5 levels of growth. So if you look here at their criteria, it says category concepts. These are the concepts here, but then if you look here, it's exemplary, so they got 8 points, so assuming it's 8 out of 8. Proficient, that's 6, 6 out of 8. Emerging is 4 out of 8, so on and so on. Limited, and then it has explanations. I think that the explanations are really important within the rubric. So then a child or a student can go back or a parent can go back and see exactly what it was that they missed or that they should have done. Some alternative ways of assessment. We more casual ways than giving them a rubric and saying, okay, here's how many points you got out of XYZ. So there's brainstorming where you can sit with the student and talk with them about what you think that they could do better, what they think the options are on how they could correct or improve whatever it was that they were working on. So also checklists, that's a very organized way to have it. Coffee talks, once again, that's a very casual way, kind of just sitting with them, talking with them, chit-chatting about how they felt about it, and then going over the rubric or whatever it is. Concept maps are a really great way to assess children, once again, in like a very in a more casual way than being so aggressive. So concept maps use ideas and relationships between the ideas. So have students use a concept map for brainstorming, planning, or for explaining a system or a casual relationship. Exit slips are use end of period exit slips so that students can process, reflect on, and report their learning. Exit slips tell the teacher how the students are progressing. So that's really important in the means of assessment. Interest inventories where students learn that they care about what they study. So you use an interest inventory to bring out our students' interests and concerns and incorporate them into these projects. A portfolio would be their work overall, so work from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Project logs can guide students' efforts and communicate the progress that they've been making. And to review protocols would just be to structure examinations of student work. So just making sure they know exactly what they have to do. And that is everything for chapters 3, 4, and 5 of our textbook.